All right. I think we're starting. So hello everybody, and thank you for being here with us today. So my name is Luis Fernandez, and I'll be moderating the panel today. I'm a product marketing leader and consultant, specifically doing research and positioning and go-to-market strategies for innovative companies, which are this gentleman here next to me. So here we have Curtis Abbott. He's a co-founder of a BitPart, a very innovative company on how to utilizing internal communication. You can operate cameras even without Wi-Fi. And obviously you guys will explain a bit more. We have Nick, Colin Richer is co-founder as well and chief engineer officer at Voyage Audio. His revolutionizing what a microphone can do, and having just one microphone, you can do it with one, or you could do it with 10 in the past. And we have Nick Nordisk. He's also a co-founder and chief product officer at Advanced Image Robotics. He's also creating specific ecosystems with cameras and robots to make sure that small production teams can exceed expectations when recording events. So, yeah, we'll start with my first question would be, what was the trigger for you guys creating your innovations?
The trigger. It's actually kind of funny. So this whole project, creating these remote control cinema camera robots, was actually born out of wanting to shoot my daughter's soccer matches. So I spent 30 years in production. I figured I can handle shooting a 14-year-old girl's soccer match, right? Yeah. Come to find out, the traditional tools I had to do that didn't really work very well, because heavy broadcast cameras up high in the air so you can get the view you need. It gets very scary very quickly, and the lightweight heads don't have the speed to move. So I eventually said, okay, I got to buy something. I looked what was in the market, and it was all just terrible. I couldn't live with shooting with that kind of stuff. So I built something for myself out of, cannibalized a drone gimbal, and put this thing up on a 20-foot pole and wrote some custom control software for it. And then I started shooting with it and realized that how I've been shooting for 30 plus years could be improved a great deal by using some new pieces of equipment to be able to move the camera. The traditional PTZs I never really liked because they were, very robotic and limited in what they could do. But by using brushless DC motors to control a camera that's stabilized, you can do very human-like movement from the camera. So I had this kind of aha moment where, hey, this could be a product. And I made the mistake of showing it to my now CEO, and he said, oh yeah, we'll find the factory in China that makes those and slap it in a box, have a nice little lifestyle company. Well, as these guys can attest, it gets very complicated very quickly.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. What about for you, Colin?
Yeah, so, I'm an audio guy, and I've been lucky enough to have designed many different audio products, mostly different kinds of microphones. And so I'm always really interested in, what's next? What else could I do to that kind of traditional analog microphone that's been around for so long, right? And I got really interested in spatial audio capture, like a lot of us. And so I said, okay, I'm going to build a spatial audio microphone and see what I can do with that. And I quickly realized how difficult some of the solutions out there were, and how much knowledge you needed. You almost needed a PhD to, just record spatial audio from a microphone. So it sort of evolved into this product here that is digital connectivity with a DSP processor built in. So this is Dante audio out. And all you need to do is plug this microphone into a Dante audio network with PoE, and you have an Atmos feed coming down your Dante network, and it's all remote controlled over the network. And you can do different kinds of patterns. You can spin them around, aim them in different directions. So the trigger is like always trying to kind of come up with a innovative tool to simplify the workflow for audio capture.
Yep. Mainly in this DNA where things are changing so quickly, we've been talking about AI, we're talking about AR, virtual reality, augmented reality. So there's a lot going on. So simplicity is key for sure. What about for you, Curtis?
Our trigger was on set. Most cinema cameras now have Wi-Fi in them, and everyone has kind of adapted Wi-Fi to control lighting, and every department on set has Wi-Fi. So when you have about 200 people come into a very small space with everyone trying to utilize Wi-Fi, everything goes, it just doesn't work. So a lot of us have tried controlling the cameras with the built-in Wi-Fi, and then we got off the shelf parts to control them with other boxes of Wi-Fi, and everyone's kind of like hodgepodge stuff together, and nothing would really work effectively, or you'd have to put a bunch of different routers everywhere. So this box allows none of that, and you just plug it in, and it's just like plugging in an Ethernet cable.
Beautiful, beautiful. So Nick, going back to you, tell us a little bit, how is for you, what would you hear for the production teams? Because I know you work in different sports events, and what do they say when they use your equipment compared to what they did a few years or even months ago?
Yeah, so the thing about our system is it's a slightly different workflow, and these guys can also speak to that as well. One of the things that all of us are doing is taking advantage of new ways to connect devices. And our traditional video equipment, it's not really designed to be networked. Now, granted, we're doing it with a bunch of stuff now, kind of kludging it together, but because they're not really designed for it, you guys all know it becomes incredibly complex to get things to talk to each other. So what we've done with our Air 1 robot is we've designed a smart device with a CPU in it so it can behave, and it was designed from its inception as an IT device. So when you plug it into a network, all of a sudden a bunch of things become possible that weren't before. Like when I did the World Track and Field Championships in Budapest, I had a deal where it was a prototype. It was the first time the robot had been out in the field, and I needed one of my technicians to tune it. He was in San Diego. So because of the nature of the robot, though, he was able to remote in, literally do all of the tuning for the robot remotely, and we were, back in action in a few minutes. So the connectivity and using IP protocols gives us all kinds of different opportunities than we've had previously. For instance, we had three robots up in the grid at UFC last night. Remote controlled, standard Ethernet. It just makes it a lot simpler to connect and control.
And it's very interesting because I'm seeing that you have one here, and it's very compact, right? It's almost you're creating this cloud production environment without an OB truck, just with a couple of them, and that's it. So
yeah, so you can put it. Whoops, look at me.
We need an audio guy here.
Yeah, not an audio guy. There you go. So yeah, so you can put it in a bunch of different places, but you can also just plug it into standard Ethernet. It goes back and connects to the mothership. The mothership then can connect it up with the operator wherever they are. So because of that, your camera operator no longer needs to be next to your camera, and they don't even have to be on-prem. We've controlled robots from 3,000 miles away for actual shoots and productions. And if you're within about 500 or 1,000 miles of the robot, it's no different than being on site. So if you come over to our booth, actually all three of us are right next to each other in the Propel ME space up in West Hall, you can connect the control to one of our robots back in San Diego, and it's literally no different than being here.
It is incredible because you can have smaller production teams to do that, which just until recently it was unthinkable to do.
Well, and leverage your talent too, because like rugby, for instance, there's not a lot of camera ops that understand the game, and it flows differently than most other American sports. So for, Major League Rugby or for other even lower tier events in rugby, trying to find a camera operator that knows the game is very difficult, particularly at the budgets that they're working with. So if you have one camera op that can do multiple games within a day, all of a sudden a bunch of things become possible that weren't before.
Yeah. It's also I saw the platform, and it's very easy to control. So again, it's easy to onboard. You don't need someone specialized to understand the complexity of the camera. Just plug and play.
Absolutely. And you guys can speak to this. Yeah. When you fired up your device over there and in 3 seconds it connected and then you didn't have to do anything else, that is the way our industry needs to go. Right now, stuff is overly complex. There's a bunch of points of failure,
Yep.
and we can do a lot better. We can make this stuff more user-friendly. Just because we've gotten the habit of doing it for decades doesn't mean we should continue to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Curtis, and I think this is a perfect transition to you because it's very similar. You create a reliable ecosystem for cameras in order to make sure that the operator have access to the settings and every time. So tell us a little bit about how that works in film sets. Let's move for a moment to film instead of sports.
Right. Well, on film sets, you have tons of people around, so the cost per minute is a lot. So if there's a glitch or whatnot, it's really, you get a lot of people looking at you in a bad way. So like if you need to change ND on a camera or change the ISO or change color temperature, stuff like that, a lot of times you'll be like, oh, I can do it. And then you lose connectivity and nothing happens. Well, with our box, you can go very far and still maintain that ability to change as quickly as the DP would like to.
Yep. And sometimes you have milling film, modern film. We used to have just one camera. Sometimes you can have different units, different cameras operating simultaneously. So how your product solve that issue if you need to connect to more than one camera?
We can connect as many as you need on a typical film set. So it's an easy. You don't have to be a network engineer. You just turn it on and push the button on both, pair it, and then you can connect it.
You don't count on, because what happened in films, you don't have necessarily a Wi-Fi connection that is reliable.
Correct.
And that's a big problem. So you solve that issue, right? You just bring your device, connect it in between the two cameras and the monitor, and that's it. Plug and play.
Yeah, well. And also a lot of people, you have to make a bunch of different connections. So you have to have like 3 or 4 different cables. Our device can just be one cable. So for instance, you can just plug a USB-C cable into the device, plug it into an iPad, and then you're off and ready to go.
That's so good. So, Colin, because I know it's audio, but it's a similar thing. You used to, production teams, they have to run several microphones, different patterns, send it through different preamps to get to the control room. Having one microphone that is so versatile. Tell me a little bit about what you have seen in production teams when they use your device compared with how it was before.
Sure. Well, everything you just said, from the analog mics to the analog cabling to the microphone preamps to the digital, analog to digital converters, is not needed. You can throw down one of these mics, plug it into a Dante network, and then you're able to remotely control the patterns, steer them around for mono and stereo work. And then you're also able to decode up to 5.1.2 directly from the mic over a Dante network for an Atmos speed. So, I'll give you an example. They use these mics at the Super Bowl, a whole network of these microphones. They had one, that was connected and mic'd up the Bellagio fountains, right? And so every time the Bellagio, the water would fire and they were in that, video shot, they would get that, feed, coming over in surround sound. They had another mic, on a camera in in-fire mode. And this is just, again, a remote control back in the truck. He's switching the mode of this microphone. Now was picking up the players as they walked by the microphone so it could track as they walked by. So it's taking the place of all of those analog microphones that would have to be for, a surround, setup, probably time aligned. And then, if they wanted to move it around, reconfigured to a whole different location. With this, you can just pick it up. You can mount it on a camera. If you're working for, say, virtual reality, this microphone can output, Ambix audio, and then in post-production, it can go up to second order ambisonics. So in post is a whole other thing.
So that's so interesting because you're pushing the boundaries, not just of the traditional production, but we're talking about virtual reality, augmented reality. Tell me, in comparison, having one microphone, have you heard production teams appreciating the fact that they could use that also for augmented reality? And what are the benefits of using this microphone for augmented reality?
Yeah. So when you're going to formats like virtual reality, you're usually going to be working in something called ambisonics. And, it sounds complicated, but with this microphone, it's really not, because you can just plug it in. You can get that output from the microphone and there you have it. And you don't really have to worry about, like, you don't have to have a PhD to understand spatial audio. You can use this mic, plug it in, get your surround feed, get your ambisonics feed for whatever, if you're working in mono stereo, take that feed. If you're going to work in virtual reality, you can take that feed from the microphone as well.
It's very interesting because we're being hearing about Super Bowl, UFC, so big names. Again, entrepreneurs, small equipment. Look what you guys are doing, which is a testament of the quality of the work on the vision that you guys actually created. My question is, what about for smaller teams? Because now you've been focusing on big tier ones, but what about tier twos, tier threes?
Yeah, I mean, that's right in our wheelhouse. That's our primary market, is the tier 2, tier 3s, where you might not be able to afford to roll a truck to a site or even roll a van. All of a sudden now you have a scenario where you can have 1 or 2 smart people set up multiple cameras on site and everybody else can be remote. You can spin up switching on demand through our air cloud and everything connects up nice and neat. There's even built-in comms in the control app. Yeah. So it's really it's taking a production truck and putting it in the cloud, but also making it simple to get at. So, set up, configure, all your routing, all of that stuff is automated.
Yeah.
So it makes multi-camera production with a cinema camera much simpler, much more cost effective.
Yeah. And also, Curtis, I have a question for you, and I'll jump in that. The same thing for you. We're talking about big films, big budgets, but what about for indie films when the budget could be $1 million or, smaller? Sounds a lot, but that's nothing. And for film, is also accessible. It's also what are your takes on that? Not just tier 1, but tier 2s and tier 3s.
Right. Well, on bigger features, you have a bigger camera department. So on smaller feature, you have less people.
Yep.
And for instance, if you're setting up a Wi-Fi network, you have to set up multiple routers. So you have to have people running those things, running cables and whatnot. So this eliminates that because you can have this box just on the DIT cart or wherever somebody's monitoring and has a control. And then it's just on the camera. There's nothing else in between and they can go,
Great. So how you guys are seeing, because again, when I was talking to you guys, I was like, the future now, this is like the dream. It's about being practical. There's a lot of traveling going on in production sports, so you don't have to think about gimbals and a bunch of microphones, just literally 2 legal luggages, and being able to control it over the cloud is incredible. So how do you see you guys evolving, or where do you see the market going from now to 5 years? Where are you guys starting to see is going to happen?
Where is it heading? I think inevitably we're heading to more remote production. There are certainly advantages to being on-prem, but the cost advantages of REMI, whether you're doing, spin up cloud instances and editing or switching everything remotely, or you're doing REMI network operation centers, there's just so much more efficiency that comes from that. If you look at the way the industry over the last 5 years has moved, all of the distribution is basically all takes place in the cloud. What we're going to have is even more of the front end of creating the content is going to happen in the cloud. It already is. I mean, we're already seeing a bunch of that. I think it's just going to become even more and further entrenched because you have very, like, to build a production truck or to build a production studio is insanely expensive. If you're creating content on those tier 2 and tier 3 levels, there's just not the budget for that. If you can take advantage of these off-the-shelf building blocks and have the same tools that the big boys have, all of a sudden now you can compete qualitatively with them. So I think it's inevitable that it goes there, given budget pressures, given labor cost and availability. Like, that's one of the big problems right now is just availability of labor.
So in the same note, what about the challenges? That's the future that we're envisioning, but what are the challenges that we'd have to overcome? I don't know if Curtis or Colin, if you have a thought on that.
Well, for us, it's probably more about education. When we started Voyage Audio a few years ago, no one knew what spatial audio was. And now with, and Atmos and these different formats, everyone knows what spatial audio is. But I think there's still a lot of education to be done on the creator side. And how do we actually create these spatial audio productions? How do we marry that to the video? And then how do you deliver it?
Yep.
So I think there's still a lot of opportunity and you know, a lot of obstacles.
Yep. Curtis, any thoughts on the?
Just to be able to go faster with less people, and not miss a shot. So often, technology gets in the way because it's overly complicated and you miss a shot, sun setting or whatnot, you need to change a setting and it doesn't happen. So now this allows the complexity to be simplified and it just works.
Yep. Nick.
Yeah, just one point to that. I mean, you all know this. Our industry is very entrenched in the way it's always done things. We're very, very slow. We tend to be very, very slow to adapt. So I would say the biggest challenge to moving this is just the inertia of how we've always done things. Thankfully, our system is one that can play nice with traditional systems. If you want to connect up a robot and feed a baseband signal to a truck, you can still do that. If you want to do a complete cloud production where you're spinning stuff up on demand, you can do that. But really what has to happen to take advantage of all of the stuff that we're talking about here today is we have to think in new ways about how our workflows happen. Because if you start to embrace that, all of a sudden, there's a whole world of possibility in not just the dollars and cents, but also in the creativity that you can put into your storytelling.
So to that point, how do you create these behavioral patterns that we've been doing for so long, right? It happens in film and, we're used to a specific ratio. And so some of us romanticize how things used to be. So how you break that and jump into this constant innovation that it's here to stay?
I think sometimes it can be a product of like cross-pollination between industries, right? So, I come from more of the recording studio world where everyone's still analog. But you're starting to see more IP-based studios open up now with Dante Networks, which is really, come from the broadcast side of things. So sometimes that's what it takes, saying like, hey, it's working for us over here. Let's try it over in this other context.
Yep, absolutely. Nick, any thoughts?
Well, competition is the thing that's going to drive it. If all of a sudden I have a production company,
the market.
Just if I'm a production company and he's a production company and he has to roll a truck to do or a van to do his production and it's going to cost him, I don't know, say it's a low budget thing, 25, 30K to do his shoot, but he can spin up cloud instance on demand, remote in my crew. I have the robots there and I can do it for 10. I can do it for a lot less than him, and that's what's going to drive him to start looking at new solutions.
Yep, absolutely. How do you do in that note? I think we have to steal some time before the questions. Have you encountered someone who is not really sure about using the product, and after using it, it's like, where I've been missing all these years? So any thoughts of how you went over that person who was a gatekeeper, if you want to call it?
Yeah, I would say everybody's a little resistant at first. Thankfully, you're never going to hear this state. Thankfully, COVID happened because it forced people to work in a different way. Like after having been forced to work in that way, people realized that there were advantages. So once people actually try it and drive it and see what it can do, it basically sells itself. The key is to get them to try it in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, I think we have 5 more minutes, and I would like to know, I think it was a great time for Q&As. So yes, we have one gentleman here. Okay.
Hi, Nick. So I've asked you this before, but maybe for the audience. Walking around the central hall, there's a plethora of PTZ cameras of all forms, and it seems to be growing all the time. Everybody seems to have a PTZ offering, right? But what are the differentiating factors of what you're doing to get into the broadcast infrastructure versus what they're sort of doing, but I'm not sure if they're actually getting into the broadcast infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge with PTZs is from top to bottom, even the highest end, it's a glorified security camera. It's relying on motors that move it in a very robotic way. The beauty about what we're doing is it moves in a much more organic way. It operates like a camera operator would move a camera. I can ease in, I can ease out. I can program movements with easing in and easing out. Because there's a CPU in there, we can do all kinds of stuff with the camera control that you can't do with a traditional PTZ. Like we have a a patented feature we call teledampening, which as the camera goes to the long end of the lens, it slows down the movement of the robot automatically so that you're not, at a narrow field of view, you're moving really quick. So there's a bunch of technical things we can do that those PTZs can't do, but there's also the image quality. Shallow depth of field, large sensors, there's just no comparison. Dynamic range. There's all kinds of things that you can do with this setup that you just can't do with a PTZ. It's also gimbal stabilized, so you can have it on a moving platform.
So do you see a day, near future, far away future, where the entire kind of infrastructure and feeling of a sporting event with lots of manual cameras, lots of big, heavy metal infrastructure, cranes and dollies and human operators get replaced with sort of a robotic capture multiple cameras this way? Like it takes over the whole industry?
Oh, 100%. And not only will it be those smaller form factors, a bunch of it will also be automated. You'll still have camera, we'll put the spatial mic on there. You'll still have camera operators, but they'll be more like an orchestra conductor where you'll have all of these robotics out there assigned to do certain tasks. And the thing that I think is really interesting about that is it becomes then more about the idea of the creative storytelling versus mechanically, do I have the muscle memory to get this shot? So that's the thing for me that's really exciting, is how it's going to open up storytelling possibilities for people across the spectrum.
Any other question? Don't hold it back. This is the time. Come on.
Hey, just a quick question for Colin. I do mostly hockey broadcasts. Would you suggest me dangling that from underneath the Videotron as a good way to maximize the spatial audio, or where else would you?
Yeah, I mean, there's what kind of broadcast?
Sorry?
Oh, hockey. Yeah, I think that wherever you want, whatever you expect to get the best ambient pickup. So right under the Jumbotron, you'd probably get a lot of PA. And I'm not sure if you'd want that in your broadcast. So you'd probably want to get it down closer to the crowd, right? Maybe on either end, maybe you'd have 4 spread out, all around the rink, something like that. And if you're doing stereo, you could, like for example, when they use these for SEC college football, they're like positioned near the marching band, and they're actually able to change the polar pattern. And so if there's like too much of the drum section, then they can, sort of aim that away from the drums to balance out the mix like that. Or if then they want to get more of the crowd noise, they can actually aim that pattern towards the crowd. So and likewise with basketball, these will be stanchion mounted on either end of the court. If they want to get the crowd, they aim the pattern towards the crowd. If they want to get the action on the court, they aim the pattern towards the court. And you could do that on the fly while you're mixing live.
Any other questions? All right. I just want to say thank you very much for being here today. It's such a amazing things to hear how, and Nick, and I want to just maybe finish with this thought, what you were saying, that everything is for storytelling purposes. In the end, it's so simplified. Is when I see you from the outside, and I really love it, is how your inventions are, how we can simplify the creative process, how we can just focus on what they're trying to show, they're trying to tell. And that would really just stick to me. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for coming here today, and enjoy the rest of the show.